We're very excited today that we have Mick Waters here to talk about the work that you and Bridget Knight are doing on the values-based curriculum. There's quite a buzz going around it, so we're delighted you're here to explain a little bit more about what's happening. And I wonder if I could just start with the fundamentals, and perhaps you could tell me just a little bit about what actually a curriculum is. How would you describe a curriculum?
What a lovely question to start with, Nigel. I think for me, the curriculum is whatever we plan for children to do in our schools. It's the entire planned learning experience. So when children are involved in lessons, we know they're in the curriculum, but actually they learn wherever they are. So in the rhythms, the routines of our daily life in school, in the events that we put on for them, such as visits or opportunities to take part in performances, or in the things that are laid on after school or before school, and different environments around school. Whenever they're involved in any of that, they're in the curriculum. So if children are involved in a practice after school, in a band to be in a performance, that's actually the curriculum. A lot of people call that after school work or extra curriculum, but it is actually our plan to help them to develop through that experience. If they're browsing for a book in the library and trying to work out where they'd like to go next in their sort of literary experience, that's the curriculum. They're not out of class, though, therefore they're not learning. They're learning about self-selection. If they're in assembly, or if they're doing a test in the hall, that's the curriculum we've chosen to give them at that point in time. And of course, some children have social or emotional relationship problems, so they might be in a nurture room, not with the rest of their peer group. And in that sense, they're still in the curriculum. We're not sort of moving them to a different bit of the curriculum. Or when children were involved in something like Red Nose Day, or that day when Pudsy's, what's that called? Children in Need. When Children in Need comes along, and we're sort of helping children to take part in something charitable so that they work out how they can support people who are less well off, in a sense, than themselves. That's the curriculum. And I think the big thing for schools to grapple with is how do we build every moment of every day into a rich learning experience for children.
So it's quite a wide scope, and probably wider than some people would imagine. So when people talk about a school curriculum, is it a matter of just describing that well in documentation?
Well, look, documentation is important, but the curriculum itself only comes alive at the point where it meets the child. So we can make a curriculum in London in government and send it to schools, but we haven't actually made anything yet, have we, except a booklet or something on the web. It's when it comes alive with the child that it starts to inform, and the curriculum starts to clarify or reassure or intrigue or amaze as it unveils new areas of learning and builds upon what's already in place in the child's mind, but helps to extend it and take it further. So until that point, the curriculum is an abstract, isn't it? It's what the government or the school or the teacher expects all the children to be offered in terms of learning. I mean, in the last few years, there's been a lot of talk about closing the gap. At first, that was about children who were sort of notionally falling behind. But over recent months, it's been about closing the gap, the learning gap that's occurred as children have been disrupted in learning through COVID. Now, the gap between the planned curriculum and the actual experience of the children, the experience curriculum, is probably the gap that, if we could bridge it, would have the most significant impact on pupil achievement and standards of education generally.
Given that we've got a sort of values-based perspective, and I know Bridget will be talking about it in more detail later, but I wonder if you think that we should start with purposes when we're looking at the curriculum.
Purposes, yeah. Purposes are absolutely, they're what drive it, aren't they? We've all got purpose in what we do. And I think that's the thing about the documentation. The curriculum isn't a static thing. It's what children live and breathe in their school. And it's not what we put in our filing cabinet, but what walks out of our schools into society that's really the curriculum. So that means we've got to have purposes at the heart of what we do. I mean, a curriculum should surely help children to be secure in themselves, able to take the step from home and community into the big wide world. You'd want the curriculum to help children to develop the way they think about others and contribute to society in a positive way. So our curriculum is something that gives the children the richness in experience that will help them as they go through school, but then beyond school into adult life. And they should look back thinking that curriculum brought joy to my learning, and it also brought real purpose in what I've become as an adult.
Many people see the national curriculum and school curriculum as well, for that matter, the statements, as being sort of a set of steps, a sort of organization of content for learning. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, that's right. A lot of people do see the curriculum as a sort of series of steps, a route through learning, a course. And sometimes we call it, don't we? We're going on a course when we get older. They sort of see it as a series of, take the content of the curriculum and sort of narrow it down into lessons and forget the events, routines, and all the other rhythms of the school day, and then start to give the curriculum out in a sort of series of tablets. So you take a tablet on a regular basis. So for maths and English, you take a tablet every day, a few fronted adverbial tablets and a quick long division tablet, and gradually you'll get all the tablets and then you'll be okay. And then, of course, you add on the odd geography or a history tablet, and now and again, not too often, and a couple more occasionally, a few doses of art or music. But I think that's a really pedestrian, almost old-fashioned way of looking at how we organise learning. There's got to be a more nuanced approach to it than that. So it's a question of how we see the curriculum. I personally don't see it as a ladder and a linear curriculum that can be climbed rung by rung and really sort of lived until you fall off. I see it more as a scramble net where you can go in any direction and your learning makes connections because you're sort of seeing opportunity as you go. And I think we've got a beat in this country and in other countries in places, this notion that the curriculum is sort of a trial by ordeal, or being at school and getting through the curriculum is an enemy to conquer. I mean, one of the sad things about exams and tests is they give children the idea that you've got to conquer learning or beat it or trick it rather than enjoy it and embrace it and take it forward. I prefer to think of the curriculum as a friend to the child. It wraps around to enable learning. It would be a sort of beautiful tapestry for me with a pattern of learning that's magical for the child, with interweaving experiences being so irresistible that they never want to put this cloak down. It's something they want to wrap around them and keep with them all through the life.
Very exciting. Want to be at your school. Mick, just one final question, if I may, in this sort of initial session. That my sense is that in quite a number of countries, and in England in particular, there's a lot of emphasis on knowledge. And some people talk about a knowledge-rich curriculum. And within the context of this values-based curriculum we're thinking about, where does knowledge sit? Is it more important than skills or attitudes?
I don't think knowledge is more important. I just think it's important. And it's always been important ever since schools were invented. Knowledge has been one of the things that we try and help children to build. And I don't think anybody would say otherwise. But we are surely moving away from knowledge being this sort of ability to swallow and regurgitate facts. And we need to be sort of thinking more significantly about how children build knowledge in a really constructive way. Now, recently, there's been some quite good work done on disciplinary knowledge, the knowledge that fits with the different subject disciplines, so that children understand that scientific knowledge is different from artistic knowledge or mathematical knowledge, or different again from historical or geographical knowledge. And that's what makes our branches of the curriculum extend and expand. But there's also substantive knowledge, which is so important. That substantive knowledge is that knowledge which helps you to, all of us, to make sense of the complexity of the real world, where different disciplines play together and sometimes against each other. So in schools at the minute, I keep hearing people talk about sticky knowledge. I'm not sure if it's different from slimy knowledge or dry knowledge. It's a sort of funny word that's come in. The idea that if we keep going with children, the knowledge will stick. I mean, you want it to stick, but you want it to be pliable and movable when they're there. And we can't just see knowledge as a sort of sticky stamps to adhere to children as though they were envelopes. There has to be a sort of sense of direction, an address, if you like, to enable a journey, or otherwise it's simply static knowledge. And I think it's an area, I think attitudes and skills are vital, and knowledge is vital, but knowledge has become one of those areas where we need to think deeper than we perhaps have been over the last few years. So it's not just about facts. It's how would it be if we really got children to consider the knowledge of relationships and how relationships work? How would it be if we got children to really build a knowledge of how processes and actions work, which is actually what skills are? Knowledge is, processes and action. And don't children need a knowledge of society and civilization and the complex nature of achievement and discovery and the way civilization over time has made amazing steps forward, and at the same time often put in side effects that later we then have to clean up and deal with? And don't children need knowledge of the sorts of jobs people do in society that keeps it functioning properly, so that they start to understand how we're all interdependent with each other? And that's why I think as children mature that they need introducing to what many people see as contentious issues, that things like environmental sustainability or Black Lives Matter or social justice generally are all examples of incredibly complex issues that often in schools we're sort of encouraged to move away from and teach just a very simplistic outlook. I mean, if time allowed, we could explore this extensively, but just as an example, in Kensington Gardens in London, you would find there is a statue of Edward Jenner. In 1858, it was placed in Kensington Gardens as it was removed from Trafalgar Square, where it had been for 4 years. It had been there for 4 years to celebrate his discovery of the vaccine for smallpox. And actually, it discovered the process of vaccination. But it was moved 4 years later because pressure groups didn't want it in Trafalgar Square. They didn't want Edward Jenner's statue there because, first of all, there were anti-vaccine groups, even then, and many of them were in the medical profession. And then the military didn't want his statue there because they disliked the notion of a seated civilian sitting among their statues of famous warriors. So if we look at those issues, anti-vaccine, statues, they're not new issues. We're having those problems now, but actually in 1858, they were having the same issues. A few weeks ago, Wales, the Welsh government, unveiled a statue of Betty Thomas, the first Black Welsh head teacher. And it's not long that we started wondering why there aren't so many female statues around and statues of people of different races and different ethnography. And these are contentious issues. I mean, in schools at the moment, in our schools at the moment, the Titanic is a sort of staple for year 6. And why is it we still teach and think about the sinking of a boat 90 years ago, when actually, in the English Channel just a few days ago, 37 migrants slipped under the surface of the water with barely a mention in our schools, because that's so contentious and difficult to grapple with. That's why I think we need a conversation about subject disciplines and values linked to knowledge. So where do values lie in subject disciplines? How do they influence them? And how are they influenced by them? And that's why the work that Bridget is doing and what she's going to work on in the next part of this seminar is going to be very, very important.
Mick, I just love hearing your views. You've got such an interesting perspective. Thank you so much for your time. Neil, back to you.